This is To the Point, your briefing on Asia's entertainment business. I'm Janine Stein.
And I'm Frater.
Hi, I'm Donovan Chan.
We're talking today about Beach House's film investments ahead of the premiere of their first film in Vietnam, which is Mr. Hero. So, Don, we'll just leap right in. Tell us about your film and your investment in film.
Yeah, I'm really excited about our investment into Mr. Hero. It's a really exciting story, a comedy, a dramedy about a taxi driver really down on his luck, trying to help his daughter through a difficult time, and ultimately deciding to commit a fraud as a pretend hero to both hilarious and very dramatic circumstances. I'll let the audiences decide for themselves. I don't want to do any spoilers on this call, other than to say that Tai Ho, our lead actor, has done an amazing job to bring to life the character of the lead character of the film. It goes out into cinemas across Vietnam, April 30th. We're really thrilled to be in collaboration with HK Film, our key content partner in Vietnam. And we plan to do a lot more in Vietnam. I think this has been a really exciting experience for us, and we're very bullish about our prospects, and we hope to do more.
How did you get involved? And why did you get involved? I mean, you're not known for film.
That's a really good question. I think Beach House Pictures has always been known as a documentary maker in the old days. We still do a lot of docs. Our primary partner these days will be folks at Netflix, Nat Geo, and WBD. We saw an opportunity a year or two back where there are certain key markets in Asia that still thrive on a theatrical box office output. We all know what those markets are. Indonesia is one of them. Vietnam, China, obviously, are some of the other ones. So we decided that other than just premium television, there is still some really exciting opportunities in these key markets. So we targeted Vietnam because of the amazing filmmaking talent that's inherent in that country. Really, sometimes really underrated, but also we also asked ourselves, what can we bring to these filmmakers that they can't really do themselves? So I think from Beach House's perspective, we spent the last 20 odd years really plying our trade internationally. So we have a great international network of relationships, especially being part of Fremantle. That really helps us gain access to areas of the industry that perhaps we could bring to the table to our Vietnamese partners and help them with everything from adaptation to distribution to investment. And so we went to Vietnam with that in mind, and we're just really thrilled that a lot of people received it really well. And we hope to announce the rest of our Vietnamese slate soon.
What is your role in Vietnam? Are you an executive producer, or are you really very hands-on in developing the script and seeing the film through all the way through marketing and distribution as well?
Yeah, actually, we do it end to end. Again, a great question. Sometimes we will go in just as a pure investor, but I think so far in all the projects we discussed in Vietnam, we have been fairly hands-on with the creative from the beginning. Not so much to, we don't want to be there to tell the filmmakers what to do because they know their audiences really, really well. I think if anything, we're there to help shape the creative in a way where once it gets to distribution, which we also do get involved in, just because, again, we're bringing a lot of these contexts to the fore. But once it gets to that distribution front, we want to be involved in the front end just to make sure that any aspect of the creative that can be tweaked or revised in a certain way that would allow us better adaptation opportunities or better distribution opportunities. We're talking about distributing in the markets where Vietnamese films are becoming more and more well-received. I mean, they just have such a competitive landscape and prices in Vietnam, and yet a very high quality craftsmanship. So we see that as a really great way to bring all of that stuff that you talked about, from distribution to creative to being hands-on. But also at the same time, I want to caveat that sometimes we don't need to be that hands-on. Sometimes the film itself just does what it needs to do. If we're that lucky and we find that project, that absolutely, it just makes our lives easier.
And who's your filmmaker?
Oh, so we have this amazing team. I really call it a team effort for Mr. Hero. We really got to know the filmmaking team through Timothy Boy, who's an American Vietnamese producer. He was the one who brought us the project, and really, I think he saw the potential immediately of what the film could do for the international market. But I think that the producing team at HK and Timothy just wanted to make sure that they got the right perspective from Beach House. So really, I would credit Timothy for kind of bringing us the opportunity and kind of being involved with us from the beginning. And that's kind of how we got in touch with the project from initially. And then from there, we've really been working with the producers directly more. The director works directly with Timothy than with us directly.
You have another film called Dumb Luck, which actually was announced before Mr. Hero, but goes into production this year. What does that say about your rising involvement in film?
Dumb Luck is a very different film to Mr. Hero. Like Mr. Hero is obviously a dramedy, whereas Dumb Luck is a period film. It's based on the country's most famous novel. It's also extremely complex, and the budget itself is obviously a little bit more. It's a bit higher than most Vietnamese films. So we've had to spend a lot more time on Dumb Luck, I would say, than Mr. Hero. So again, what that says about our investment in Vietnamese films is that, we're not just after we're not just after low cost genre films per se. Sometimes when a project like Dumb Luck comes along and it has that potential to both hit a critical audience but also a mass audience, we kind of lean into that particularly, because with that one, it's a really special case, and it just takes a bit more time to gestate, than say a film like Mr. Hero. So I think what that says is that we are after commercial hits first and foremost, with abilities to get international adaptation and distribution, but we're also after the gems. Like Dumb Luck, a film like Dumb Luck doesn't come along very often, so that's why it just says that we can be very ambitious, but we're also extremely, tactical when it comes to what kind of films we're invested in on the commercial front.
How did you get involved in Dumb Luck?
Again, that was brought to us by the director Lin, who himself is a well-known director in Vietnam. He's made many different commercially successful films in the past. So he brought us the project through our head of scripted, Connor Zorn. The way he brought it to us was like, first of all, the book that was already optioned, and when we read it, we were just blown away that something like this good has not been made into a modern film in recent times. Obviously, it's not unknown to Vietnamese people. That book is read in schools. It's been made in the drama shows in the past. Like, it's not a new sort of story, but I guess the opportunity to put a fresh lens on it in a sort of feature length style, with hopefully fresh perspectives from us internationally, would make it an easier film to travel than I would say some of the previous iterations. So that's kind of how we got into it. And then obviously when the script came out and we read it, we're just thrilled with how well received our feedback was to Lin, and we're just really excited to see what happens to it next.
You mentioned travel. This is something that interests me very much. How Asian films do or perhaps do not travel, first of all, within the region. So, simple starter question on the subject: do you have international sales agents for these two films?
Yeah, we don't have our own sales agency, obviously. So we work with a lot of different partners. Folks like, there's so many really good international distributors and agents. Film Nation is someone that we work with quite closely. The guys based in New York, Goodfellas. I could name a whole bunch of different distributors. I think the key thing for us on these sort of films, you raise a good point, because the conventional thinking would be, hey, let's just do a really, really, really good local film that just hits the local audiences, and then by default, that would then allow it to travel internationally just because it's done so well on home soil. I think that is absolutely true. There's no argument about that. But I think for us, we're trying to find the films that would do that but at the same time would also have the adaptation quality and distribution quality. There's a lot of markets, for example, that Vietnam films would travel well in. In the US, there's a big Vietnamese diaspora. Vietnamese film do travels well sometimes in other markets like China, for example, or elsewhere. So I think it really depends on the film. And for us, we're a little bit more picky than I would say most investors, because we're not a Vietnamese studio, so we can't we just can't roll out Vietnamese films only. We're really looking at all the markets from Indonesia to Vietnam to Thailand. So we tend to spread our slate out a little bit more widely than other studios.
That makes sense in terms of spread, and I know that you and I have had conversations in the past where we've looked at your remit as a company. You've been operating in India and China and Southeast Asia, and genuinely, not just lip service. So that was very impressive. But back to the subject in hand, which is the travelability of Asian films. And I'm looking at what's happened in the last couple of years, and there've been quite a lot of very significant local hits in individual territories in Asia, and the box office record has been broken 4 times in the last 2 years by Hong Kong movies. There's a brand new Taiwanese movie which is breaking records, and Thailand has had films like Grandma and others. There's been 2 record breakers in the last year in Vietnam. There's lots of great success stories. But my question here is, how much do they travel within the region? How much are they being seen by people elsewhere? I mean, how many Vietnamese films have been released in Japan or Korea, to pick a couple of markets at random?
Yeah, I would say for Vietnamese films, not a lot. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. I'm always of the belief that you can't make lightning strike twice in the same place. I think anyone who says I can replicate How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies would just be asking to fail, because the same could be said, like people say, oh, I'm gonna find the next K-pop Demon Hunters. I don't think the world works the way that we would love for it to work. I think if it was that easy, everyone would be doing it. I think for us, precisely because Vietnamese films have traditionally done really well at festivals, I would say, not so much box office. But that's precisely why we lean into it, because we see the value of what it could do. Like, we live in a world now, in an industry where, if you price your films too high, then you fail at the box office to recoup or make a profit. And I think that's getting harder and harder in some of the bigger box office markets. But we saw the opportunity in Vietnam where it's still quite competitive, but yet there's a huge cinema going public. So, if we were able to, work with the local producers and directors and dictate the terms of how that film gets made and how we could shape it for distribution, there is every chance that we could make that next Vietnamese film work in a box office somewhere else, or adapt it for a key market like the US or China or elsewhere. For us, it's precisely because Vietnamese films aren't as prolific as, say, some Thai films or India films, that maybe it's underexploited in that sense. And I think the Vietnamese studios and filmmakers could see that themselves, And I think in a market where you look at some markets like Korea, for example, where it's kind of priced itself out of the market on some level, Vietnam offers some of those advantages in this new world that we're living in.
That makes a lot of sense. I have a follow-up question to you. When is a movie, a film, a beach house film, and when is it a Momo film? Because this is an art house label that your company also owns.
Yeah. Yes. I've been asked that question before. So, when we acquired Momo Film Co., what impressed us most about Suan's, company strategy, even her tonal approach to her films, is that it's so different from Beach House. I mean, Momo has this really edgy, often female-centric perspective. It also has this really great indie reputation, especially at festivals. They're starting to move into the box office side of things, where they're releasing some of the films theatrically in the countries they're made in. I think that's what we loved about Momo, and we saw that it was a part of Beach House that we were missing. Beach House, I would say the difference between us and Momo's projects, Beach House has a much more commercial bent to the projects that we pick up. I'm not ashamed to say that as much as I love filmmaking, I'm also a businessman. And I'm always looking at how would these projects work on the distribution level? How much can I help my investors recoup and make a profit? I mean, I'm also running a business where we're about 50 folks, 50 to 60 strong at any one time. So, I do have a business I need to run, and I'm obviously looking at some markets more on a genre specific level. I would say that the easiest thing to think about is that if I'm making this up, but if I'm making a Jackie Chan film, Momo would be doing something that would probably go to Cannes Film Festival.
Right.
So that's the sort of thing that I think separates Beach House to Momo quite easily. So often when people send us projects, it may not, if it's not an immediate fit for Beach House, it doesn't mean that it won't be a good fit for Momo. And vice versa with Momo. Sometimes they send us projects and we go, hey, so there are two different roads to Beach House, really, via Momo and us. And things get made depending on what kind of genre and what kind of angle the film is about.
Does that mean that they do have completely different financing techniques as well?
I think so. CERN is particularly good at private financing and government grants, as well as independent financing on that side of things for the film front. Beach House, we're a much older company. We tend to, as a studio, we do invest directly into projects. Obviously, we could also do what Momo does and find the private financing and government grants to kind of go into it. But we also, obviously, as being part of Fremantle, we have brought Fremantle into the projects as well in the past. Dumb Luck is something that Fremantle is invested in alongside Beach House. So, I guess like both Momo and Beach House have different ways to a financing equation. And sometimes we work together. So like Red Butterfly, which is not a film, it's a drama series. We're kind of looking at going to production later this year. So it's really exciting. And hopefully we can be announcing our leads, our cast very soon. That project, Beach House and Momo are working together because one of the key objectives that we had when we acquired Momo was to take some of that juicy, really edgy, cool quality that comes with the company, but somehow find a commercially viable project that would benefit from that lens, but that Beach House could weigh in and bring a lot of that sort of scale and network into the equation. And so I think Red Butterfly is a great example of that. Momo has traditionally never been in television. We kind of brought them into that, and then we worked together to create something that would be new and exciting for the market. Cool. So yeah. Both sides.
Red Butterfly is kind of premium television for Europe.
Yeah.
So it's another whole new direction for you.
Yeah, it is. It is. I want to give credit. Obviously Momo and Beach House, we've worked really hard on that, but I want to give credit to Studio Canal and Canal Plus for really being such amazing partners. They believed in the project from day one, and really worked really hard together with us to really pull the financing and the writing team and everything together. So it's difficult. It's always, when something's special, when you find like-minded people from the beginning, and then they have the grit and determination to kind of persevere with you right to the end, and that's always a good sign. And obviously, we're as announced at ATF, we're working with IMDA and Singapore Tourism Board. Really, who again, like Studio Canal and Canal Plus, are huge believers in the project. So I think we're just thrilled that we could pull that partnership together.
I think could we just take a pause and tell people what Red Butterfly is about?
Very, very, very glad to. Red Butterfly is a series set in 1950 Singapore. If for those Singaporeans out there, you kind of remember that your history lessons that the 50s in Singapore was like the Chicago of the East. It was a fairly lawless post-war place where, obviously the British colonial powers were waning. The powers were waning. The gangs were quite prevalent. They were ruling the streets. You had the early versions of the CIA operating within Malaya because of the communist insurgency. So you had this really confluence of bad and good characters kind of congregating in what is essentially still a very profitable port city, right? And so you had amongst this chaos and also characters, you had these disenfranchised women, some of them still kind of reeling from the effects of post-war Singapore. They come from all walks of life, construction workers, remember there were a lot of women working in construction back in that time. And then you had prostitutes, you had cabaret dancers, like you had these women who came together and realized that, hey, I can't depend on these men to protect us or to serve our interests. We're going to have to come together and help each other out. And thus began this Red Butterfly Gang that started as these group of victims who became vigilantes and then started ruling the streets. I don't want to give any spoilers out other than to say that it's a very stylish, edgy drama with badass women characters doing a lot of action stunts. And ultimately, lots of great relationship, angles and triangles, and lots of great action. We brought the action directors from Everything Everywhere All at Once, the Marshall Club team, to come and help us with the action front. So yeah, it's a really great team, and I'm hoping that people will like what we produce.
I want to ask what language it.
This is the thrill of being in the Asian business, but also obviously internationally facing. We're gonna make it, obviously it'll be English first because it's gonna be distributed globally, but we are allowing local dialects like Mandarin, some of the dialect groups like Hokkien, Cantonese to seep in. Within our series, there's also a Tamil gang. So people will be speaking, Tamil in the series, which is kind of cool, I think. Most of the time you see Hindi in the theaters. So I think it's a really nice way to bring in that sort of multicultural melting pot of Singapore, which in the 50s, this was even before Singapore became independent. So you had this really interesting pre-country version of Singapore that was still a real immigrant society,
Now to the really other end of the spectrum, you have another film, a feature documentary. It's really your specialty. It's the heart and the core of what Beach House is. The Elephant Odyssey in IMAX.
I'm so glad to finally release this film. It's been a passion of mine for, I would say, almost the last 3 to 4 years. IMAX, this is the IMAX team in LA and IMAX China that we've been working with. It's one of the few original feature docs that IMAX co-produces every other year. We're really glad to have them as partners again because I think we came in fairly early in this new slate that they've created. And I think the first film that came out was the Blue Angels with J.J. Abrams producing. And then we came in that batch of films that they greenlit. So the Elephant Odyssey is really about the journey of a Chinese elephant handler and his relationship with a rescue elephant and how they're trying to complete the mission of getting this elephant rewilded in China. Now, for those who know the history or not know the history, like elephants have really conventionally been very, very difficult to rewild. And I'll let the viewers who watch this film discover if this poor, adorable elephant gets rewilded in the end. But should it get rewilded, it's the first time in history China or maybe even the world could see this happen. And it's closely intertwined with this amazing journey that this herd of 16 elephants took in 2020 when the world's under lockdown. And that journey went viral for 2 years. I think some of you guys will remember seeing these elephants run free across China, the south of China, and wondering where are they going and what are they doing? And so we helped to give the audiences some answers and also connect the dots between what these elephants were doing and what our key character, rescue elephant, has to embark on himself. So it's a really beautiful, powerful emotional story that I'm hoping would be premiering in June this year. We hope to kind of find a great festival partner but eventually launch it across all the theaters in China before getting it out internationally.
Well, the Shanghai Film Festival starts in June, so your timing might be just right.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, it might be Shanghai Film Festival. I'm not sure.
I wonder if I could flip back to something a little bit more corporate. Your company, Beach House, has been a part of one major international corporation in the past. Now you're part of another one, and I was just also thinking this week. We've had all three media in Europe and banners there getting together. What do you make of all these media mergers?
I don't think it's wrong to say that, yes. I think on some level, scaling, consolidating, and having some scale does make sense. It absolutely makes for a great story, but it also makes for a very pragmatic solution to a world that's very chaotic and being impacted in multiple directions. So I do think that scale doesn't always equal to immediate success. I think there's a lot of integration that will need to take place. That tends to, being personally having gone through, to your point, several of these sort of transactions from the early days of NHNZ to Blue Ant Media and then to Fremantle. I think our history is fairly clear, and so I would say it's not an easy process. I mean, and when I say it's not easy, it means that when you have to kind of pull two companies together of very different cultures, sure, there's some similarities, and that's why they're attracted to us, but it still takes a bit of time. I can only imagine what it'll be like for all three media and Banijay to then, these two behemoths to kind of come together and go, okay, now we're just going to make everything work immediately. No, I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I'm pretty sure there'll be a lot of challenges for them, but I mean, I think good luck to them. I think scale is great, but I think in the market this fragmented and difficult, I think you also need to be nimble, and you need, one of the phrases I often use to a lot of people is that I think big companies like us and folks like Banijay and all three, we can't think like big companies. I think in a market this difficult, we have to behave like startups. We have to be hungry, we have to be nimble, and we have to move fast. I think people fail when they can't move quickly. Because AI is not going to wait for us. Micro content is not going to wait for us. Like, these things have a life of their own. So I'm still kind of preaching that sort of mentality all the time.
Any predictions about the Asian impact of an all three Banijay merger?
I wish I had a crystal ball to say that, but I like to always think about playing my own game. I think I like it. I mean, I think it makes for a more interesting market. I think one of the things about Asia is that we always punch above our weight. There's a reason why all of us are operating in Singapore and Southeast Asia, for example. Everyone recognizes it's a growth industry, right? And everyone wants a piece of it. But no one really works that hard to try and really throw a lot of investment behind it, because they still see Asia as a place where you can invest very low numbers and get high yield. I think, my experience of investing in China over the last almost 20 years is that you need a lot of patience in Asia. Asians don't talk in terms of months or years. We talk in terms of decades. When I remember Michael Stedman, who used to be a CEO of NHNZ and who's obviously sadly since passed, but one of the things he always told me when introducing me to China was, he says, you got to be patient in China, and you have to make the context, because these contexts last a lifetime. Because the Chinese, they don't see the world the same way as the Americans do. So I've always remembered that lesson, and I think culturally in Asia, it's not a culture of one, it's a culture of so many, 20, 30 different countries. I think for me, it's never boring. I learn something new every time I go to Korea and Japan and China and India. And I think the West has a lot to learn about how to make a buck in Asia. And hopefully the folks at Paramount, Skydance, would take something away from the WBD purchase, as would all three in Banijay. But I like to think, being here for long enough, that we'll be, I welcome the competition, but also welcome the partnerships. We all have to work together. We're living in an era where it's better than 50% of something than 100% of nothing. It's the number one rule. We need projects that would kind of tip the scales. I think that's where people will focus a little bit more. When you have projects that do really well in China, like How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies is a great example. It kind of got people's attention. So we need more of those projects to do that, because when they're successful commercially, but they're also successful artistically, that's when people pay attention, and we need to hit those marks a lot harder. And this isn't just a Beach House mission; it's an industry wide mission. We can't. Yes, we focus on the local successes of these projects, but we also have to think internationally and regionally. Otherwise, we'll always be underinvested in Asia.
Do you think this is easier with film than with TV?
It would seem that it's easier with film, but I think television is going through a really interesting change, because you have micro content, you have AI hitting us quite hard on the TV front. And TV, funny, this is a funny discussion, because I don't think that TV is TV anymore. I think of it as screens. I'm producing for different screens. I'm producing TV-like content for traditional free-to-airs, but I'm also producing for streamers as well as YouTube and TikTok. So I think of TV now as a multi-screen opportunity, and how many screens would this project be suitable for, and why, and who's paying for it. That's kind of how I think about TV. So I think in theory, TV actually has as much of a chance to succeed as, say, a film, but it's really down to the filmmakers. Like for me, I'm not in the quantity game. I can't do what some of these micro content platforms do. I'm all about premium. So, I have to pick my projects. I have to pick my wins very carefully. I can't go out and just do these distribution deals that a lot of people are doing really well in. That's not a market that we can compete in.
I'm gonna ask you a sort of a thing we do occasionally with our guests, and I realize it might catch you a little bit on the hop, but I'm going to ask you, what is your current favorite piece of Asian content, either film or TV, that you're watching and enjoying, and it's not yours?
Wow. My favorite, I have to say, I really love watching Culinary Class Wars. It's funny. I've been so busy. I watched most of the Culinary Class War episodes was over Chinese New Year this year, because it was the only 2 days I had an opportunity to sit down with my family and just veg out. And that's when I watched some of I know I'm a bit late to the game, but I've heard so much good things about it, but I only really kind of absorbed it over Chinese New Year. And I think it's so clever what they did, that they were able to figure out a way to compete with the master chefs of the world in a way that made sense, but is also quite sticky, and it's such great family viewing as well, because I was sitting there, I spent most of the time talking to my mom about who's going to win and why someone should actually not win and get up to the second tier. Like all these, it's such a great conversational TV show. It kind of makes you lean in. And I think that's why it's done so well. And I thought the producers were super clever to do that. So that's something I enjoyed recently. That wasn't mine.
Well, I love that. You may be late to the party, but I think you did bring a very good pun. You said you were vegging out.
Patrick, what's yours?
It's a Singaporean art house film called Amoeba. The director is Palace CEO. This film played in a number of film festivals at the end of last year, and I believe it gets its Singapore theatrical release either at the end of March or beginning of April this year. And it's a film about a schoolgirl gang. So keeping the gang theme going here.
There's a difference between a period gang and a slightly more modern story on gangsterism. We live in Asia in societies where they can be quite conservative nonetheless. So, as again, I'm a very commercially attuned producer. I have to think about where my film will end up, and it needs to be profitable. So, I do get jealous about filmmakers like that don't have those responsibilities or perimeters, because they get to make more fun and exciting and edgy things. I think I need to I have different responsibilities and benchmarks to hit.
Donovan, thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you, Donovan. Sounds like you have a lot of interesting things, which I'm going to need to go and see soon.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me for this. Lots happening on the Beach House Fremantle world, so stay tuned. I hope you see some of our new shows this year, and let me know what you think.
This has been To The Point with Janine, Stein, Frater, and this week with Donovan Chan. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.